Hey, welcome back to Well, That's Interesting. This is so random, even for this show edition. Today is episode 208, Contact Lens Found in Woman's Eyelid 28 years later, and how one man's jump on the moon almost ended in death. My friends, there are strange stories, and then there are strange stories. Ones that are so inconceivable and far-fetched that when you hear the details, you put your hands on your hips and go, oh, this doesn't really help me in any way, but damn, I can't wait to tell other people about it. How does this even happen? In the first half of the show, we are back on old Medical Oddities Lane, visiting a case that occurred way the fuck back in 2018. Now, if 2018 feels like several lifetimes ago for you, yes, you're right. It was for all of us. So much has happened since. And so many events happened in that year alone, which are horrendously dumbfounding in their own way. For example, Brett Kavanaugh wept over his love of beer and boofing during a job interview, and China changed its constitution to remove presidential term limits, effectively allowing leader Xi Jinping to remain president for life, which had absolutely no influence on other governments around the world and reflected no political trends. In that same year, a 42-year-old woman in the UK visited her ophthalmologist for a minor symptom. Her left eyelid had been swollen and drooping for several months, and although she felt no pain per se, she wanted to give it a look-see. Now, I know that doesn't sound very peculiar at first, but we need to get into the surgery performed on that left eyelid. We need to talk about the object that was found within, and then I'm going to ask you to have a seat as it's revealed not only where it came from, but when it came from. If you're a longtime listener of WTI, then you know we have covered many a story about an object finding itself inside a person. But this one, because of its unusualness, is that a word? Well, it is now. Because of its unusualness, it's going to end up in your top 5. I cannot wait to get into it. Then after the break, we are leaving Earth for our celestial companion, the moon, and we are heading even farther back to the groovy year of 1972, a time when the US and a country that was then called the Soviet Union was in the midst of an intense strategic competition to see which would dominate the world, socially, culturally, and technologically. Luckily, that's all over with. At the time, however, the US was all about grandstanding by sending Americans to the moon. Americans like Charlie Duke, an astronaut who flew on NASA's Apollo 16 mission. Charlie was 36, and the youngest person to step foot on the moon. And 3 days into his mission, it showed. It showed a little bit. We will get into what he called horsing around, and how the one small decision he made on an alien world could have made him not only the youngest person on the moon, but the first person to die there. Hi, I'm Jill Chacha, and if this is your first time listening, welcome to the flock, my grounded business goose. To begin, I'm going to need you to clean out the old time machine and scooch over a bit, because we're all squeezing in our delightful cheeks and heading on back to 2018. We just made a soft landing on the shores of the River Tay. And now we're going to nonchalantly walk into the ophthalmology department at the Dundee School of Medicine. And for my fellow geographically challenged Americans who are wondering what in the holy hell is going on and where this is exactly, don't worry, I've got you. Please, everyone, imagine England. Brilliant. Point to the center. Now move your finger directly north until you hit a coastline. Wonderful. Here is the Scottish city of Edinburgh. Now, if you move a smidge farther north, you'll pass over the River Tay, and you'll find yourself and the flock in a city that overlooks it. That is Dundee. Now, this city loves itself some aquatic history, having revitalized its waterfront with not one but two nautical museums, one being the RRS Discovery, Captain Scott's Antarctic Expedition ship, you know the one, and a 19th century warship, adorably and awesomely called the HM Frigate Unicorn. Yes, I love it. The city has also very much embraced 21st century medicine with its graduate school, the Dundee School of Medicine, whose goal, according to its website, dundee.ac.uk, is to, quote, provide an outstanding education in its invasive learning environment. Integral to our academic culture is the commitment to teaching programs that are research-informed and research programs that have an impact on health and well-being. We believe in supporting students and staff and to achieve our core purpose, which is to transform lives, both locally and globally. End quote. Woo. Well, here we are. Today at Dundee's ophthalmology department, standing beside doctors Surjan Batal, Lei Ling Tan, and Helen Murgatroyd, who are about to live up to that core purpose and transform the life of a 42-year-old woman, all while making headlines around the world. For UC, our patient had arrived complaining about a minor yet noticeable difference in her left eyelid. And good news, I have a photo of both of her eyes over at our social media stuff, so please drop your child, your groceries, or the wheel of your car, whatever it is, just drop it. And pick up your phone. Tap on today's post and have a look at her left eye, which is the one to our right. I'll give you a second to compare the droopiness of the two. Okay, I have it up here myself, and I have to say, it is dangly and a bit puffier than her right eye. Now, along with mentioning these symptoms, the patient also noted this began about 6 months ago, and it hadn't improved. Oddly, the puffiness didn't come with any pain, redness, or sensitivity. It was as though whatever this could be just came into existence, just out of thin air. Intrigued, our doctors did what any quizzical doctor would do and gave her eyelid a poke. They felt the left eyelid, then the right, and boy howdy, wouldn't you know it, not only were the eyes different in size, but they certainly felt different too. It was clear to Dr. Surjan, lead author of the case study we're diving into, that yes, something was embedded behind that left eye. It was time for an MRI. And that means it's time to head on back to our social media stuffs and tap on today's post. Swipe past the face of our patient and you'll see what's behind that face thanks to the MRI. That, my flush business goose, is a human skull with a human brain and a human eye. And thanks to the red arrow provided by the authors of this case study, we can see something else. Above the left eye, where the eyelid should be, doctors spotted a teeny tiny mass, a mere 8 by 4 by 6 millimeters in size, or 0.3 by 0.2 by 0.2 if you're into inches, or if you fancy a food-related comparison, it was about the size of a pea. The preliminary diagnosis was a cyst, and as for why it was there, the only explanation at the time was, well, that it happens. But there was no cause for alarm. Our patient was told that with a minor incision, the medical staff would be able to remove it lickety-split, and she would be out of the office the same day. And so it was. A swift operation was performed, and the pea was removed without any incident. However, now that it was in possession of the surgeons, they did what any curious surgeon would do. That's right. They cut it open. And if you'd like to see what they found, all you have to do is swipe past the photo of the MRI. There you go. That's right, my 2020 business goose. That is a contact lens. But 'tis no ordinary contact lens. Or at least one that's no longer ordinary. For you see, it's a rigid gas permeable lens, or an RGP for short. According to theeyedoctors.net, these artifacts were/are made of a special hard plastic that permits oxygen to pass through the lens material into the eye. Now, being made of hard plastic, they do have some benefits, like lasting a year or longer if cared for properly. They just need to be stored and thoroughly cleaned and disinfected. The durable material that they're made of also helps prevent tearing and scratching from everyday use. But I can see your expression. I think you're thinking, okay, that's great, but do I really want hard plastic on my eyeballs? I mean, it sounds a little uncomfortable, and I'm already full of microplastics. Yes, that is understandable, and yes, quote, RGP contact lenses can take a long time to get used to. It can take several days or even a few weeks before you feel comfortable wearing them all day. One of the reasons for the discomfort is that you could feel the contacts in your eyes when you blink. End quote. Put a sticky pin in that. In the meantime, you are probably also thinking, I can see your expression, hold up, aren't contact lenses pretty flexible nowadays? What's going on here? Does this mean the contact was manufactured like a while ago? Well, I am so glad you asked. Let's start with that first question. Yes, thanks to the invention of soft plastic polymers, soft contacts are now the most common type of contact lenses, making up over 85% of contact lens prescriptions. So yes, that means the hard contact lens extracted from this woman's face is probably on the older side. But just like you, she was absolutely at a loss for words. She told the doctors she can't even recall wearing hard contact lenses. For our patient, it was as though this just appeared in her eye hole. Now, if you're a longtime listener of this show, then you know when a patient has a difficult time remembering how something foreign ended up in their body sack, every now and then, a family member is right there to help out. For example, in episode 197, Man Hospitalized After Eating Live Crab and Vengeance, and What's in the Mouths of Mayan Sacrificial Victims, we heard the tale of a father whose short fuse landed him in Sir Runrun Shah Hospital, riddled with parasites. He too was bewildered as to how they got in his digestive system until his wife was like, hey, remember that time a crab pinched our daughter on a family walk and you ate the whole goddamn thing right out of the river, right then and there in front of her? For vengeance? Yeah, that happened. And if you'd like to know more about it, have a listen. That was episode 197. Today, this bewildered patient, for her, it was her mother who came forward. Yeah, good old mom dusted off her list of everything her 42-year-old daughter had ever done and ever did, and pointed to an event most of us would forget too. When she was 14, yes, 14 years old, this British teen was being very British, playing a game of badminton. And at some point, she was hit in the face with a shuttlecock. I am a professional, and that is what happened. This 14-year-old was hit in the face with a shuttlecock, which means, my mature business goose, that this contact lens had been stuck in her left eyelid for 28 years. And I bet you have a lot of questions, like, why do they have to name it shuttlecock? And how in the hell did the lens get up there? And how in the hell has it never caused a problem since? Excellent questions. Not to get on a fucking tangent, but the thing got the shuttle part of its name from its back and forth motion during a match, which makes you think of the purpose of an actual shuttle. But no, someone thought that the motion resembled the shuttle of a 14th century loom. The cock part of its name is derived from the resemblance of the feathers on a rooster. This is why the equipment also goes by the name Birdie. But that's not as enjoyable, especially when someone gets hit in the face with one. Speaking of which, how exactly did the lens end up under her left eyelid? Well, it's time to unpin that sticky pin, my friends. That one about people with RGP contact lenses feeling discomfort when they blink? Well, according to the case study titled Unexpected Cause for Eyelid Swelling and Ptosis, Rigid Gas Permeable Contact Lens Migration Following a 28-Year-Old Trauma, quote, we speculate that when the eyes rapidly close during a blink reflex, the contact lens may have moved and adhered to the upper eyelid fornix, eventually becoming covered with conjunctival epithelium and embedded. End quote. My friends, that is just a fancy-ass way of saying she blinked so goddamn hard it done got stuck under her eyelid, and the conjunctiva, which we learned about in episode 193, queen bumblebees can survive a week underwater, and this parasite lived in a woman's eye for 2 years. The conjunctiva is the white part of your eye, and a part of that secretes mucin. Mucin helps maintain the old eyeball's moisture levels, and it's believed enough was produced in response to the object to kind of lube it up, if you will. But since the lens was never found and never removed, the material around the lens eventually stiffened over time to become a cyst. Now, I know. As to why it never interfered until 28 years later, the medical staff, they can't say. They don't have an answer. I know, it's gross, but stick with me here. I suppose the lesson is to check your face after an interaction with a shuttlecock. That's the only thing I can think of. After the break, we are leaving Earth for the moon, but we are sticking with gravity having its way with people. A one giant leap for an astronaut nearly ended in complete disaster. And good news, we have it all caught on film. Yeah, stay tuned for this one. Next.
No one hates history, they just haven't found the right teacher yet. Or in this case, a nerdy best friend who loves to tell you all about world history, women's history, and weird history. Hi, I'm TK, the creator of For the Love of History podcast, a place for people who want to learn more but don't know where to start, and history lovers who want to break from the mainstream. From rat trials to warrior women, we cover topics from every country and era. Whether you're a history expert or just starting out, there's a place for you here in the Time Machine. So join me every Friday on your favorite podcast platform and YouTube for a brand new topic. See you there. Bye.
We're the All Creatures Podcast. Each week, Angie and I explore and share amazing details about the many animals we share our world with.
Plus, Chris and I are both PhD scientists and educators. So we do the deep dives in the scientific research and then come back and share what we learn in a fun and casual way. We also speak with other scientists, animal experts, activists, and many other conservation enthusiasts from all over the planet.
So you can find the All Creatures Podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
And we're back. We are so back. And my friends, I'm going to need you to slip into your finest A7LB pressure suit because we're hitching a ride on the Apollo 16 space mission to the moon. It's a little snug in the command module, not only because we're donning plump 185-pound suits, put a pin in that, but we are joined by the Apollo's pilot, Ken Mattingly, John Young, commander of the entire crew, and of course, 36-year-old Charlie Duke, who was assigned pilot of the lunar module on board, which is basically a go-kart for the moon. And if you're thinking, damn, playing Mario Kart on the moon sounds exciting, all you have to do is take a look at the photo of this team over at our social media stuffs. Swipe past the cracked hard lens from the last segment's shenanigans, and you'll see our crew, who are about to get into some shenanigans of their own. On the left there, sitting in the lunar go-kart, that's Charlie. And he's fucking beaming. Now, this photo was taken sometime during the crew's training period in 1971, when NASA's Apollo space program was in the midst of a series of successful space missions that truly changed the course of humanity. Words like historic, monumental, triumphant, unprecedented, and trailblazing don't even begin to explain what this program had achieved. Not only by being the first to land on the moon, but to then make several consecutive round trips that brought back literally hundreds of pounds of moon samples and produced hundreds of pages of scientific discoveries. Apollo 16 was to continue this legacy and to help carry out the latest investigations by landing on a section of the moon called the Descartes Highlands. This was to be the very first scientific expedition here. The crew was to inspect, survey, gather sample materials, and plant devices on what is the highest region on the near side of the moon. And to be honest, at the time, researchers didn't know much about it. It was believed this area was volcanic in origin, and they proposed it was mainly composed of basalt. And they could only assume this based on color alone. The region has tones of gray when observed from Earth, and these visuals, that was the only suggestion. That's all they could work on. It was hoped that actual rock samples retrieved by Apollo 16 would, 1, end the speculation and determine what the fuck this place is made of, and 2, provide hard evidence about the processes that formed the highlands, and maybe even show that such processes were still active. Because in the early 1970s, it was wondered if the moon was still volcanically active, which is really none of our business. Now, being the lunar go-kart pilot, it was Charlie's responsibility to traverse the moon with Young, collecting rock samples and soil samples, and make history while doing it. Unfortunately, the Apollo 16 mission was hardly a spacewalk in the park. Let's start with the training. Join me, will you, on the big island of Hawaii in December 1971. We're a mere 2 days into our final preparations when Charlie is hit with a case of the flu so severe, quote, he was unable to get out of bed, and asked the astronaut office to send someone to take him to the doctor at the Kennedy Space Center. The doctor took an x-ray that revealed pneumonia in both lungs and called an ambulance to take Duke to the Patrick Air Force Base Hospital. End quote from the wiki. Charlie was so incapacitated he feared he wouldn't make the launch, which was scheduled for March 17th, 1972. Luckily, I suppose, some of the equipment for the Apollo 16 mission was also incapacitated, and liftoff had to be delayed until April. Turns out, the explosive cords that separate the lunar module, aka the go-kart, from the command module, it failed during testing, and thus needed replacement. Now that sucks, but this one is a bigger whoopsie. A clamp in Charlie's spacesuit, the one that helped keep it closed, also failed during training, which required modification of all 3 astronaut suits. Needless to say, all parties involved were glad that it was caught in time. And even more good news, this wasn't the first near-death experience on this mission. On the way up, like in fucking space to the moon, the craft suffered a double failure on the pressurization system. Young described this as, quote, the worst jam I was ever in, end quote, from the Apollo 16 Flight Journal. Long combative story short. A story that included a feisty debate between the astronauts and mission control. The problem was fixed. Kinda. And the crew landed safely, about 276 meters northwest of where they had to be, about 6 hours behind schedule, and at an altitude higher than expected. But hey, they were alive. For the next several days, I am very much happy to report Charlie and Young absolutely crushed their responsibilities, breaking records in the process. Charlie became the youngest and the 10th person to walk on the surface of the moon, following Young, who became the 9th. End quote. In a stay of 71 hours and 14 minutes, Duke and Young conducted 3 excursions onto the lunar surface, during which Duke logged 20 hours and 15 minutes in extravehicular activities. These included the emplacement and activation of scientific equipment and experiments, the collection of nearly 213 pounds of rock and soil samples, and the evaluation and use of the lunar rover over the roughest surface yet encountered on the moon. End quote. My friends, in sum, Charlie Mario Karted harder than anyone who could have ever Mario Karted previously, and that deserves a round of applause. Now, with all the hard work being done and in the books, it was time for the real records to be made. My intergalactic business goose, at the same time our team was on the moon, back on Earth, the Olympic Games were being held in Munich, and the crew of the Apollo 16 wanted every Olympic athlete to hold their beer as they performed the Lunar Olympics. You heard me. Quote, we just started out doing the high jump, Charlie told David Mosher of Business Insider, and thanks to NASA's Apollo Lunar Surface Journal, we know how that worked out. Let's get into it. My friends, remember our bulky A7LB pressure suit? The one that weighs about 185 pounds? Well, since gravity on the moon is a wee 1/6 of what it is here on Earth, this suit weighs a mere 50 pounds or so. The astronauts themselves weighed about 185 pounds too, so altogether a 400-pound individual on the moon could really catch some height. What Charlie was about to realize, however, was that the weight wasn't equally distributed. Young was the first to jump, starting off by grabbing and holding the back seat of the rover for stabilization. It turns out it was a damn smart move, as we're about to find out. Like this, he performed a series of 3 jumps, getting higher with each one. Upon the 4th jump, Young let go of the rover and soared into the vacuum of space for 1.85 seconds, which on the moon means he reached a height of 2.3 feet. He slowly fell back to the lunar surface, stumbling backwards a few steps, but otherwise, just fine. Now, Charlie, standing a few yards away, alone, and with no equipment to hold on to, he felt it was his time to shine. From Duke's memoir, Moonwalker, quote, I decided to join in and made a big push off the moon, getting about 4 feet high. Wow, I exclaimed. But as I straightened up, the weight of my backpack pulled me over backward. Now I was coming down on my back. I tried to correct myself, but couldn't. And as my heart filled with fear, I fell the 4 feet, hitting hard, right on my backpack. Panic. The thought that I'd die raced across my mind. It was the only time in our whole lunar stay that I had a real moment of panic, and I thought I had just killed myself. The suit and backpack weren't designed to support a 4-foot fall. End quote. My friends, my oxygen-loving business geese. Let's take a moment and talk about that backpack for a moment. A crucial part of our suit that's called the Primary Life Support System, or the PLSS. If you head on over to our social media stuffs and tap on today's post, you'll see the pack in all its naked glory without a cover. And like the name suggests, everything you need to survive on the deathly expanse of the moon can be found inside. On one hand, the pack provides two-way voice communication, displays suit health parameters, and displays the wearer's immediate vitals, like the heart rate and stuff. On the other hand, we have the big guns. Its mechanisms regulate suit pressure and provide breathable oxygen. Just as important, they remove carbon dioxide and contaminants from that oxygen, all while cooling and recirculating it. If this pack is damaged, the sudden depressurization would leave you unconscious in seconds and lying on the lunar surface without oxygen. Even if a colleague found you, dragged you back to the lunar module, closed the airlock and pressurized the spacecraft, it would still be too late. And Charlie knew it. Quote, "Had the backpack broken or the suit split open, I would have lost my air. A rapid decompression, or as one friend calls it, a high-altitude hiss-out, and I would have been dead instantly." End quote, from his memoir. After the fall, all Charlie could do was wait and listen. He fumbled his way back onto his feet, and yes, he listened to the sounds of the PLSS to determine if anything had broken. Quote, "My heart was pounding. You could hear the pumps running, and I said, well, I think I'm okay." End quote, he told Business Insider in a 2019 interview. "I learned a lesson. Never do anything in space that you haven't practiced." And we had not practiced the high jump. End quote. My friends, he was fucking okay. And this nightmare that felt like an eternity was actually only a few seconds. And guess what? You can watch the whole thing. Yeah, it's time. Please head on over to the tube of you and search Lunar Olympics, astronauts jumping in 1/6 Earth gravity, and a video 1 minute and 35 seconds in length will pop up. Again, that's Lunar Olympics, astronauts jumping in 1/6 Earth gravity. What this is, my friends, is the original recording from the Mauer 16mm motion camera used by the crew and remotely controlled. If you've got your hands full, like full of moon dust and shit, and you can't watch along, don't worry. I'll give a little recap and description here. Who you're going to hear first is Commander Young. And then you're going to hear a loud, "Wow!" And that's Charlie, who leapt and then fell, causing a panic. We're then going to hear a few words from the man himself, the great Charlie Duke. So, here we go.
We think so too. We were going to do a bunch of exercise that we had made up as the Lunar Olympics. Show you what a guy could do on the moon with a backpack on. But for a 380-pound guy, that's pretty good. They threw that out. Yeah, jump flat-footed, straight in the air. 300, about 4 feet. Wow. Charlie, that ain't any fun, is it? That ain't very smart. Well,
we have a few minutes left, so we decide to do the Moon Olympics. I decide to try to set the high jump record on the moon. And as I start to do that, I bounce a couple of times, and then I fall over backwards. And as I fall over backwards, fear strikes. If I split my suit open, I'm dead. As John helps me up, I get very, very quiet as I listen to the pumps and the oxygen flow in the suit. Fortunately, the suit holds and my fear subsides.
Well, Charlie walked away from his fall, which is better than any gold medal, to be honest, in that situation. Also astonishing, this wasn't Charlie's first fall. No. He also fell face first while inserting an instrument called a pentrometer into the lunar surface. Another time he fell over trying to pick up a pair of tongs that astronauts use to pick up objects that they dropped. So he fell over trying to get the tool he needed to pick up the other tool that he dropped, which was a hammer. And they use these tongs because when they're dressed in these kind of suits, they can't bend over completely. And I gotta tell you, I feel for Charlie. I would be the exact same. I would do the exact same thing. It's maybe worse. That's why I'm thrilled to report NASA is consistently working on designing new and improved spacesuits, but until they are clumsy-proof, I'm not going anywhere. No, thank you. And thank you for listening, rating, subscribing, telling your friends about the woman and her contact lens in her eye. Yeah, you can tell them when, like, they're trying to tell you something really heartfelt and deep, and you bring this up. And then you could tell them about the guy Charlie Duke, the man himself, who jumped on the moon and nearly died. See? We all make mistakes. And an oxygen-deprived thanks to the folks over at Airwave Media, the podcast network to which WTI belongs. If you love this show, and you do, you'll love the other podcasts in this family. And please, stay interesting.